So we started the Epiphany season with this quote: "We do not grow by knowing all the answers, but instead by living with the questions." And weeks ago, we began living with some questions in the season of Epiphany, exploring questions Jesus asked those around him, the disciples and the crowds. And we started by pointing out that most biblical scholars can point to the truth that and have traced and identified that Jesus asked about 307 questions in the Gospels that scholars can find. I pointed this out a number of weeks ago, and most scholars say, and all they can find is that Jesus only answered 3 direct questions with a direct answer. So that was part of the reason we wrestled with a question. And in the past few weeks, we have wrestled with some very interesting and challenging questions, such as when Jesus is asking the disciples as they're in the boat and the storm is hitting it, and they're so frightened and terrified, and Jesus asks them, "Where is your faith?" Or when the disciples come to Jesus saying, "We cannot feed the crowd," Jesus asks them, "How much bread do you have?" And even the question Jesus answered last week, or asked the lawyer who wanted to justify himself, Jesus said, "Who is your neighbor?" So these questions are important things to hold within our hearts and minds, to ponder and reflect upon, and in that way learn so much more. But in many ways, the question at the heart of our story this morning, the question I think we're going to ponder together to end our series, is really actually a very simple question, and some might say it's a kind of inane question as well. It's a question that the answer on the surface seems obvious enough, yet expresses something deeply within us, some yearning, some desires we might have. It is a question I think we all ponder in our lives at times. It is the question Jesus asks the blind Bartimaeus, son of Timaeus, in our text this morning. And that question simply is, Jesus asks, "What do you want me to do for you?" So here's the scene. Jesus and the disciples are on the road from Jericho when a blind man, we're told his name Bartimaeus, son of Timaeus, sitting by the road. And I imagine by sitting by the road, he's there begging by the road. And then hears that it's Jesus of Nazareth who's coming down the road. And he cries out, "Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me." Now, Bartimaeus, by calling Jesus Son of David, is applying a title associated with and evoking the image of a Messiah. So Bartimaeus recognizes who Jesus is. And it's one of the ironies of our little story this morning that Bartimaeus, the blind man, sees Jesus for who he is when the rest of the people do not. Then Bartimaeus cries out again, "Jesus, Son of David, have mercy upon me." And many of the people, I love the line here, I don't know if you noticed it, sternly ordered him to be quiet. Sternly, not just ordered, but sternly ordered him. And I often wonder why it is that they were so concerned that he be quiet. Maybe he's just a little unseemly and shouting for attention. Maybe they're just a little uncomfortable with this broken human being inserting himself into the scene. Or maybe they just don't want to pay attention to Bartimaeus himself. To see the blind man on the side is to acknowledge the brokenness of the world. But whatever, they sternly order Bartimaeus, "Be quiet." But Jesus hears Bartimaeus. And again, another very interesting detail, Jesus, it says, stood still and said, "Call him here." And those around Bartimaeus say, "Take heart, he is calling upon you." And he sprang up. I love this scene. Sprang up, throwing off his cloak, and came to Jesus. The image I had in my head is when at a basketball game, there's a sub on the sideline, and they get called in. Have you ever seen them spring up and take off their sweats and stuff? That's the image I have of Bartimaeus jumping up. I'm finally in the game. Jesus is here. Ready to play. And then comes this question from Jesus to Bartimaeus. "What do you want me to do for you?" Some might say it's a dumb question. Of course, what does Bartimaeus want Jesus to do for him? "I want to see. Let me see." So why ask the question? Yet there is something profoundly human and humane by Jesus asking that question. It's human and humane because Jesus really wants to listen to Bartimaeus, to really hear what it is he wants. It's a way to care for and connect to Bartimaeus. Now, maybe Bartimaeus doesn't want, maybe Jesus doesn't assume that Bartimaeus wants to see. Maybe what Bartimaeus needs deep within is some kind of reconnection to his father, or wants to restore some kind of broken relationship. Jesus doesn't assume what Bartimaeus wants. He asks him. He asks him, and he listens. And there's an odd assertion if you think about this, if we extrapolate and ask ourselves at the heart of our own prayers to God, what do we want God to do for us? What do you want God and Jesus to do for you? It's a question I think each and every one of us wrestle with at time and can enunciate with this deep yearning and desire within us. What, Jesus asks us, can I do for you? The danger, of course, is that we treat God as if God was some genie in a bottle that we've rubbed and we get 3 wishes, right? That's the danger, in our prayers and petitions. "Oh Lord, won't you buy me a Mercedes-Benz?" Huh? Or very common kind of theology today, health and wealth and prosperity gospel. "God, make me rich." What do you want me to do for you? Or maybe in this day and age, or we have heard many ask God, "God, kill my enemy," right? Is that really what we want God to do for us? Now, it's very interesting. I thought of reading just the verses before this tells the story of John and James, son of Zebedee, and they go to Jesus and they say to Jesus, "We want to ask you for something." And Jesus asked the very question he asked Bartimaeus. It's before he's talked to Bartimaeus, but he asked them, what do you want me to do for you?" Jesus says to James and John. The very exact question. And James and John says, "Hey, we want to sit on your right and we want to sit on your left. When you enter your glory, we want that Mercedes-Benz. That's what we want from you, Jesus." And what's so interesting about that is Jesus says, "Do you really want to sit on my right and left? Do you really understand what that means? Are you willing to drink from the cup I drink from? Are you willing to be baptized with the fire I'll be baptized? Do you really, really want that?" Today, what do you want Jesus to do for you? Now, that may seem a simple question to answer enough, maybe obvious at times. But the truth is, it's a question we ought to ponder and reflect on. Now, there's this prayer exercise I've done with folks before. I learned early on in my ministry. It's called a breath prayer. And all you have to do in this breath prayer is start by the most comfortable or the most meaningful name you have for God. You'll just start calling on God's name, whatever that might be. Jesus, Lord, Father, Mother, Peacemaker, whatever, Holy One, whatever word for God has most meaning for you. And then you ask of God your deepest need and desire. Holy One, grant me peace. And it's a prayer that you can kind of say as you breathe in God's name, as you breathe out what it is you desire. And I've used that with a number of folks in ministry, particularly with those who are dying. And it's amazing the breath prayers they have. Many of them may start, please, God, Holy One, help me live. And that is a very common breath prayer, but then it changes. Ease my pain. And it even changes then. Watch after my family. And part of the brilliance of this breath prayer is that you are asked to share it with those around you. In fact, today you got a little postcard, a little card, and I invite you at some time today, at some point, to write your own breath prayer, to answer that question Jesus asked. What do you need me to do? To really pray about it and reflect it, to write that prayer down on that card and put it in the mirror when you brush your teeth in the morning, or put it by your bedside when you go to sleep, and pray that prayer over and over again. And I encourage you, in fact, to even be willing to share that with someone else, a friend, a family member, and ask them to pray for that for you as well. It's a great exercise for us to do, a spiritual prayer exercise for us to do as we enter the season of Lent. What is it you really want God to do for you? And be careful. To God be the glory this day and forevermore. Amen.